The rain was falling hard over Birmingham that night, the kind of rain that blurs streetlights and makes the city look like it's melting. Ozzy Osbourne sat inside his van, engine humming low, parked near an old brick orphanage that looked forgotten by time. He wasn't supposed to be there. His tour had ended 3 days ago, and he'd promised Sharon he'd rest, but something inside him was restless. The silence after the final concert always made him uneasy, as if the applause stopped too suddenly and left a ringing emptiness behind. He was flipping through a notebook filled with half-written lyrics, none of them making sense, when he heard it. Faint music coming from the orphanage basement. It was out of tune, raw and broken, but real. A thin melody scratched from a cheap guitar, a thump from a bucket pretending to be a drum, and a voice, shaky but full of soul. Ozzy frowned, leaned forward, and killed the van's headlights. The sound pulled him closer like a secret calling out his name. He stepped out, rain soaking through his coat, and walked toward the glowing basement window. Inside, 5 kids were playing with whatever instruments they had. One strumming a broken acoustic guitar with 2 missing strings, another tapping a metal bucket, a girl singing with her eyes closed, holding a plastic bottle like a microphone. Ozzy stood there in the dark, watching them through the dripping glass, his breath fogging the window. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. That same wild, pure fire he felt the first time he played with Black Sabbath in a tiny club decades ago. It wasn't about fame, money, or lights. It was about sound, about feeling alive. A thunderclap shook the ground. The smallest boy, maybe 8 or 9, looked up and noticed Ozzy's shadow at the window. He froze. "Oi!" he shouted, pointing. The others turned, startled. The girl dropped her makeshift mic, and the room went quiet. Ozzy raised his hands slowly, half smiling through the rain. "Don't stop," he said, his voice muffled but kind. "You sound bloody good." The door creaked open a minute later, and a tall boy with messy hair peeked out. You're Ozzy Osbourne," he stammered. Ozzy grinned. "Last time I checked, yeah." The kids stared at him like he was a ghost, not sure whether to run or ask for an autograph. "What are you doing here?" the girl asked softly, stepping forward. Her voice carried something older than her age, a quiet toughness that comes from surviving too much too young. "Couldn't sleep," Ozzy said. "Heard your music. Thought I'd see who's making all that noise." The oldest boy crossed his arms. "We're not supposed to let strangers in. Sister Mary says—" Ozzy chuckled. "I'm not exactly a stranger. I've been on your posters, yeah?" He pointed to a faded picture of his younger self on the wall, a magazine cutout someone had taped above an old amplifier. The boy's defiance melted into curiosity. "You really think we sound good?" he asked quietly. Ozzy nodded. "I think you sound real. That's rarer than good." They invited him inside. The basement smelled of damp clothes and paint thinner. Instruments were pieced together from scraps. A cardboard box drum, wires stretched across a plank like a homemade bass, and a keyboard missing half its keys. "We call ourselves the Sparks," said the girl, smiling shyly. "Because we're small, but loud." Ozzy laughed, the sound echoing warmly. "That's the best band name I've heard in years." They sat together for a while, the rain still hammering outside. The kids told him how they found instruments in dumpsters, how they played to forget the nights when the power went out and everything felt too heavy. "Music makes the dark go away," the youngest boy said, his voice trembling. Ozzy looked at him and felt his chest tighten. He saw himself, the poor Birmingham kid who once stole food just to survive, dreaming of singing on real stages. "Tell you what," Ozzy said, standing up. "You kids ever played on a real stage?" The girl shook her head. "They won't let us. We don't have money for gear, and the social worker says concerts are for rich schools." Ozzy's grin widened. "Then maybe it's time to change that." They looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Ozzy's eyes gleamed with mischief. "I mean, we're going to put on a show. Tonight. You, me, everyone here. A real rock concert. Right in this orphanage." The room erupted with disbelief. "You're joking," one kid said, half laughing. Do I look like I'm joking? Ozzy said, spreading his arms dramatically. We'll borrow what we can, plug in what works, and make some noise. The world's forgotten this place. Maybe it's time we remind it we're still alive. The kids exchanged glances, half fear, half wonder. The girl's eyes shone like tiny lights in the dim basement. But we don't even have real guitars, she whispered. Ozzy winked. I might know a bloke or two. He pulled out his phone and called one of his old roadies, an old friend named Terry who still lived nearby. Terry, mate, I need a favor, Ozzy said. Yeah, right now. Bring a van and whatever instruments you've got lying around. Amps, guitars, drums, the works. No questions. Within an hour, a beat-up van screeched into the alley behind the orphanage. Terry Silos, in bed out, shaking his head. You're mad, Ozzy, he said, grinning. What's this, a secret gig? Ozzy slapped his back. Something better. A miracle. They unloaded instruments, scratched guitars, an old Ludwig drum kit, and 2 mics. The kids couldn't believe their eyes. The youngest boy ran his fingers across the glossy black guitar body as if touching magic. This is real, he whispered. Ozzy gathered them in a circle. Listen up, rock stars. Tonight, we're not orphans. We're not forgotten kids. We're a band. And bands don't wait for permission. They play. They practiced for hours. Ozzy tuned guitars, taught them rhythm, showed them how to count in a beat. He hummed melodies and helped the girl adjust her breathing when she sang. Her voice, raw but beautiful, filled the basement like light, sneaking through cracks. That's it, Ozzy said softly. Sing from the place that hurts. When power flickered, Terry ran an extension cable from the van. When strings snapped, Ozzy replaced them with spares from his bag. At midnight, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Ozzy turned to the kids, sweaty and smiling. You ready to wake up this city? They nodded, hearts pounding. The girl adjusted her mic, her voice trembling. Who's gonna come? Ozzy smirked. Trust me, they'll come. He wasn't wrong. Word spread fast. A rock legend playing with orphan kids. By 2 a.m, neighbors were gathering outside the old gates. A few bikers, some local musicians, a couple of reporters who caught the rumor online. Flashlights and phone lights glowed through the mist. Ozzy stepped outside, climbed onto a wooden crate, and shouted through the drizzle. You lot out there, you want music? Cheers erupted. Then you're getting it. He turned to the kids, standing behind him in the doorway, wide-eyed and shaking. Showtime, he said. They plugged in. The first chord rang out, sharp and electric. The crowd went wild. Ozzy let the kids lead, stepping back as the girl's voice rose through the night, trembling at first, then fierce and free. The little drummer pounded like thunder. The guitarist strummed with wild abandon, and for a few minutes, the orphanage became a cathedral of sound. People recorded on their phones, but even through tiny screens you could feel it, the purity of something real being born. Ozzy joined in halfway through, grabbing the mic and harmonizing with the girl, his raspy voice blending with her clear one in a haunting, perfect contrast. When the final chord echoed into silence, the crowd exploded in applause. The kids laughed, crying at the same time, overwhelmed by the noise, the lights, the love. Ozzy looked at them and felt tears in his eyes. You did it, he whispered. You bloody did it. The girl hugged him suddenly, her small arms clutching his waist. You made us believe, she said. Ozzy knelt down and hugged her back. No, love, he said softly. You made me remember. But the night wasn't over yet. As the crowd began to disperse, flashing blue lights appeared at the end of the street. A police van pulled up, and 2 officers stepped out frowning. Who's in charge here? One asked. Tibidian. Ozzy sighed and raised his hand. That'd be me, officer. The cop looked him over, recognition dawning on his face. Ozzy Osbourne? The one and only, Ozzy said. You can't just set up a concert in the middle of the night, the cop said, trying not to smile. Ozzy shrugged. Tell that to rock and roll, mate. The officer sighed, glancing at the kids, who stood clutching their instruments nervously. He leaned closer to Ozzy and whispered, "Look, I should shut this down, but those kids, they look happier than I've ever seen anyone look in this neighborhood. Finish up, clean by morning. No trouble, yeah?" Ozzy smiled, grateful. "You got it." As the van drove off, the girl looked up at him. "Are we in trouble?" Ozzy shook his head. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Tonight, we're legends." They spent the rest of the night playing softer songs. Lullabies turned into rock ballads, the sound echoing across the wet streets. Ozzy told them stories between songs, about how music saved his life, how he once thought he'd never be good enough, and how the world only listens when you scream from the heart. The kids listened, eyes shining. By dawn, the rain had stopped completely. The clouds broke open, revealing a pale pink sky. Ozzy looked at the kids sleeping among tangled wires and empty snack bags. He felt peace, the kind he hadn't felt in years. When Sister Mary arrived that morning, she froze at the sight. Amplifiers, guitars, and kids sprawled across the floor. "What on earth?" she whispered. Ozzy stood up, brushing off his coat. "Morning, sister. Sorry about the mess. We had a bit of a concert." Her eyes widened. "Mr. Osbourne, I should—" He handed her a folded check. "Before you scold me, open this." She unfolded it, eyes going wide again. This could run the orphanage for years." Ozzy smiled softly. "Buy them real instruments. Let them play. They've got something the world needs to hear." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the sleeping children. "You gave them hope," she said quietly. Ozzy looked at the guitar resting against the wall and whispered, "They gave it back to me." He walked out into the morning light, tired but alive, the sound of their laughter echoing behind him like a song he never wanted to end. But little did Ozzy know, that single night was only the beginning. Weeks passed, and the video of that night began to spread online. Someone from the crowd had uploaded it with the title, "Ozzy Osbourne Plays with Orphan Kids in the Rain." Within days, millions watched. Comments flooded in, people crying, donating, promising to visit the orphanage. Reporters came, then talent scouts, then producers offering contracts. But Ozzy told the kids one thing: don't let them change who you are. You're the sparks, remember? Small, but loud. By Christmas, the children had real instruments, uniforms, and a tiny studio built from donations. They recorded their first song, Home in the Rain, dedicated to the night Ozzy found them. It topped charts for weeks, not for perfection, but for truth. Months later, when Ozzy stood backstage at their first real concert, he watched the lights dim and heard that same trembling voice from the girl he'd met in the basement. Only now, it was strong, fearless. The crowd roared as she looked up and said into the mic, "This one's for the man who showed us what music really means." Ozzy smiled, eyes wet. For the first time in forever, his heart felt young again.